To imagine a future in which humanity never leaves the solar system is to begin with a disappointment that slowly changes character. At first it sounds like defeat. The stars remain visible and unreachable. The great promise of interstellar expansion closes like a door, and the species finds itself confined to the family of worlds already circling its own sun. The ancient dream of crossing from one star to another, of making the galaxy a navigable geography, begins to look less like postponed triumph and more like a misunderstanding of scale. Light years remain what they have always been, not romantic units, but warnings. Yet disappointment, if it lasts long enough, can become architecture. A civilization that accepts the impossibility of interstellar travel would not simply stop moving. It would turn inward, not toward Earth alone, but toward the full depth of the solar system. The moons, the asteroids, the orbital shadows, the rings of the giant planets, the inner furnace near Mercury, the dim frontier beyond Neptune, all would remain. The unreachable stars would still hang over the species like a judgment, but the local empire of matter would remain vast enough to absorb millennia of ambition. That is what makes the question so strange and so compelling. If humanity never leaves the solar system, then the future is neither small nor triumphant in the old heroic sense. It is enormous, but bounded. It offers abundance, but not infinity. It permits expansion, but only around one star. It gives the species room enough to become unrecognizable to itself while still remaining trapped inside the slow dominion of the sun. The result may not be failure. It may be something more difficult to describe. A civilization of extraordinary breadth living forever under a ceiling it can see and never cross. The first task would be psychological. Human beings have spent centuries turning the stars into promises. Astronomy enlarged the known universe, physics explained its distances, and imagination refused to accept what those distances implied. There has always been a temptation to treat the galaxy as a future map, as though enough courage and engineering might transform light years into routes. If that hope finally broke, or at least faded into permanent impracticality, civilization would have to renegotiate its relationship with the night sky. The stars would remain objects of study, perhaps of reverence, perhaps of sorrow, but no longer of settlement. They would become the visible edge of action. This would not necessarily produce despair. In fact, it might force a more mature sense of scale. The solar system itself is already so vast that ordinary language reduces it to a tidy diagram far more quickly than the mind deserves. Even within the orbit of Neptune, there are distances that make terrestrial intuition almost useless. Communication to the outer planets can take hours one way at the speed of light. Travel between major worlds would still consume months, years, and vast industrial effort. A species confined to the solar system would still inhabit a realm broad enough to sustain great migrations, regional identities, delayed authority, and political autonomy on scales no empire in history has approached. The real shift, then, would not be from movement to stagnation, but from fantasy of infinite outward escape to the discipline of inhabiting one stellar system deeply. Humanity would stop dreaming of the galaxy as a neighborhood and begin learning the solar system as a continent of continents. It would become a civilization asked to treat one star and its retinue not as the preface to history, but as history's primary theater. Under such a future, the sun would acquire a new kind of political and spiritual importance. On Earth, the sun is already the deep source behind climate, agriculture, and the broad energy budget of the biosphere. Yet modern societies often experience that dependence indirectly through ecosystems, fuels, electricity, and habit. A solar system civilization would feel the centrality of the sun much more explicitly. Near Mercury, solar intensity would become almost obscene in its abundance. In the asteroid belt, solar energy would still be practical, but more precious. Beyond Jupiter, sunlight thins into a dim and rationed grace. Entire regions of civilization would be defined partly by how close they remain to the furnace that makes most ordinary life support economics possible. This would create a civilization not merely spread across space, but stratified by radiance. Inner system habitats might flourish with solar abundance, enormous photovoltaic fields, intense industrial throughput, and short communication lags to older centers of population. The outer worlds might depend more heavily on nuclear systems, stricter resource cycling, and a culture shaped by dimmer light and colder horizons. To live near the sun and to live under the pale daylight of the outer planets may become experiences as different in cultural consequence as living beside the equator and living beyond the Arctic Circle once were on Earth, only far more extreme. One star would therefore not produce one experience. It would produce many provinces of dependence, each defined by a different negotiation with distance, light, delay, and local material wealth. A civilization that never leaves the solar system would remain unified by the sun in the deepest physical sense. Yet that very unity could become the source of profound internal diversity. Earth in that future would remain important for far longer than futurist rhetoric sometimes admits. It would likely continue to be the cradle of language, law, memory, biospheric wealth, and moral symbolism even after large populations moved elsewhere. But its primacy would not remain simple. Once millions or billions of people lived in orbital habitats, on the Moon, on Mars, in free space settlements, or in the engineered economies of asteroid colonies, Earth would cease to be the sole, obvious center of civilization. It might remain culturally sacred while losing administrative centrality. It might become an ancestral world whose authority survives partly through prestige rather than through enforceable command. This transition could be delicate. Earth-born political traditions might attempt to extend themselves outward, only to discover that delay, distance, and radically different local conditions make direct continuity impossible. A settlement on Mars or in the Jovian system cannot be governed forever, as though it were merely another province across an ocean. Communication lag alone begins to force autonomy. Add the material differences of low gravity, closed ecological systems, local industry, radiation risk, and time delay, and one begins to see why Earth's future role might resemble that of an old capital whose descendants have grown too far and too strange to remain obedient in the old manner. The emotional consequence would be equally complex. Earth could become at once home, myth, pilgrimage site, archive, and political problem. Many may still long for it. Others may see it as beautiful but constraining, too bound to biospheric sentiment and old legal habits. A civilization that never leaves the solar system may therefore spend centuries renegotiating the authority of its birth world without ever fully escaping its symbolic gravity. Orbital habitats would likely become one of the defining forms of human life under such a future. Planets are powerful in imagination because they look like homes from a distance, but free space offers certain advantages that planets do not. Gravity can be simulated through rotation. Illumination can be managed. Local environmental conditions can be designed rather than endured. Material can be imported from asteroids or moons without forcing every settlement to climb constantly out of a deep gravity well. If humanity remains confined to the solar system, the most numerous humans may not live on planets at all. They may live in cylinders, rings, rotating habitats, and engineered settlements strung through space like deliberate ecosystems suspended in vacuum. Such habitats would transform the meaning of landscape. A horizon would no longer be a gift of geology and weather alone. It would be something composed. Daylight would be scheduled. Agriculture would be designed into civic space. Parks might arc overhead. Rivers could be part engineering, part ceremony. The world inside such structures would be intensely artificial, yet perhaps more legible than many planetary frontiers. Human beings have always altered their environments. Orbital habitats would simply make that truth impossible to forget. But to live in such places for centuries would require profound maturity. Closed loops of air, water, waste, and food do not forgive negligence easily. A space habitat is elegant only so long as its hidden disciplines remain intact. If humanity never leaves the solar system, then a very large fraction of its future may unfold inside architectures that are beautiful precisely because they are controlled, and terrifying because control can never safely relax. the Moon and Mars would still matter enormously, though perhaps not for the reasons early conquest narratives preferred. The Moon is close, mineral-rich, and useful as a staging ground, research environment, manufacturing site, and cultural threshold. Mars is farther, harsher, emotionally potent, and likely to become one of the great laboratories of planetary settlement. If the stars remain forever beyond practical reach, then these worlds cease to be intermediate steps on the way to a galactic future. They become lasting terms of civilization in themselves. That change of perspective matters. A Martian city imagined as a temporary proving ground feels different from a Martian civilization imagined as one of the permanent poles of human existence. The same is true of lunar industry, asteroid extraction, and outer system outposts. The work becomes less theatrical and more architectural. Instead of rushing through local worlds toward a larger destiny, humanity would begin building a multiform solar civilization whose great task is not escape, but endurance. In such a future, Mars may become a republic of delay and discipline, the Moon a dense industrial and logistical shell around Earth, and free-floating habitats the true population engines of the inner system. Each would cultivate its own moral style. The Moon might become austere and infrastructural, Mars patient and severe, orbital habitats intricate and ecologically self-conscious. One star would not generate one humanity. It would generate a family of conditions in which human cultures are forced to diverge while still sharing a single cosmic address. Asteroids would acquire a civilizational importance difficult to exaggerate. They are not merely rocks drifting uselessly between the planets. They are archives of early solar material and, in a more practical register, immense reservoirs of metals, volatiles, and industrial possibility. NASA already discusses asteroid resources in the context of exploration and future use, and any large-scale human presence beyond Earth would likely come to depend heavily on what such bodies can provide. If humanity never leaves the solar system, then asteroid belts and near-Earth objects may become the quarries, warehouses, and foundries of the future. Water for life support and propellant, metals for construction, rare materials for electronics and manufacturing, all could be drawn increasingly from bodies that need not be lifted out of a deep planetary gravity well. This would make mining not a peripheral industry but one of the decisive foundations of long-term expansion. It would also make the geography of resource access one of the central political questions of the age. Control over asteroid traffic, extraction rights, transport lanes, and refinement hubs could shape the future the way control of sea routes, coal basins, and oil fields once shaped earlier empires. Yet unlike those older struggles, the relevant environment would be orbital and three-dimensional, and the consequences of sabotage or monopolization could be severe for habitats living close to resource limits. A civilization confined to the solar system may thus become less a civilization of continents and more a civilization of trajectories, depots, and engineered supply chains moving through dark between stones older than Earth's oceans. The outer system would remain both frontier and inheritance. Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune are too far, too cold, and too large to become homes in the terrestrial sense. Yet their moons offer possibilities that would continue to attract science, industry, and perhaps settlement. Europa, Ganymede, Callisto, Titan, Enceladus, and other icy worlds extend the imagination of civilization into environments where water may exist in abundance, where chemistry becomes exotic, where sunlight is weak, and where survival depends even more heavily on local adaptation. NASA and ESA have both treated ocean worlds and outer system habitability as major scientific priorities, which underscores how much richness may still lie within our own stellar neighborhood. To live there would be to accept a different emotional regime from life in the inner system. Time lags grow longer, solar energy weakens, travel becomes rarer and more consequential. Communities could become proud, inward, and highly self-reliant. Their cultures may be marked by dimmer skies, stronger ritual around return windows, and a greater sense of existing at the farthest edge of common human conversation, while still remaining under the same sun. If humans never leave the solar system, then these outer worlds cease to be curiosities. They become the remote provinces of a single stellar civilization. Their distance from Earth would give them mythic weight, while their dependence on deep engineering discipline would likely make them socially intense. They may be the places where humanity learns most clearly what it means to remain local in a cosmos that seems endless. Communication would shape politics as profoundly as geography. Even within the solar system, the speed of light imposes non-trivial delays. Messages from Earth to Mars can take minutes each way. To Jupiter or Saturn, the lag grows much longer. This means a solar system civilization would not be able to rely on the easy illusion of simultaneity that shapes modern planetary media networks. Command would lag. Financial decisions would lag. News would age in transit. Emergency consultation would arrive after the decisive moment. Such delays do not abolish unity, but they change its character. No central government can remain omnipresent under these conditions unless it becomes extraordinarily tolerant of local discretion. Law might be shared, but implementation would diverge. Culture might remain networked, but each region would still develop its own temporal atmosphere. Political legitimacy would likely depend on federative models, layered autonomy, and the recognition that distance is not merely spatial, but procedural. Over centuries, this could produce a civilization whose members feel simultaneously related and profoundly far apart. They share a star, a broad human inheritance, and perhaps a common scientific memory, yet they live inside delayed realities. A political speech from Earth may already feel historical by the time it becomes emotionally relevant near Jupiter. A crisis in the outer system may be discussed at the center only after its decisive phase has already passed. If humanity never leaves the solar system, then one of its great accomplishments may be learning how to remain a civilization without remaining immediate to itself. Culture would diverge accordingly. Gravity alone may be enough to alter habit, sport, architecture, bodily ease, and notions of beauty. A people shaped by Martian gravity, lunar industry, orbital rotation, or outer system enclosed habitats may not move alike, build alike, or imagine domestic comfort alike. Add to this the differences in light, danger, resource discipline, travel frequency, and educational emphasis, and one begins to see how quickly one civilization could become many related civilizational styles. Food would vary, festivals would vary, ideas of home would vary. A child born in a spinning habitat with a painted inner sky may regard weather as an archaic extravagance. A miner raised among asteroids may think in terms of trajectories and salvage. A citizen of Mars may inherit patience as civic instinct because delay saturates daily life. A resident of the outer system may experience Earth not as motherland, but as historical brilliance too bright and too distant to organize ordinary emotion. This divergence need not imply enmity. It may instead become the great richness of a solar system civilization, its answer to the diversity that interstellar expansion might otherwise have provided. Human beings may never stand under another natural star and still become more various than any earlier age imagined, simply because one stellar system already contains enough material and environmental difference to refract the species into many futures. Closed ecological systems would remain the moral core of much of this future. ESA's long-term work on closed-loop life support, including Melissa and related research, reflects a truth that any enduring off-world civilization would have to confront. Air, water, food, and waste are not separate conveniences. They are one metabolic question asked repeatedly under different pressures. If humanity never leaves the solar system, then millions or billions of lives may eventually unfold inside habitats, stations, tunnel cities, and enclosed colonies where ecology is designed rather than inherited. This would require cultural changes as deep as any technological advance. Waste could no longer be forgotten. Water could no longer be sentimentalized as scenery alone. Food production would remain tied visibly to civic competence. Air quality would become a matter not just of private comfort, but of public trust. The old terrestrial luxury of externalizing consequences would diminish sharply in many regions of human life. This might make future societies more disciplined, more ecologically literate, and perhaps more grateful. It might also make them tense, because closed systems leave little room for denial. A civilization confined to the solar system may become, in its most advanced forms, a civilization forced to mature materially. It would learn that survival in artificial worlds depends on treating the metabolism of life not as invisible background but as sacred infrastructure. Power would remain one of the decisive currencies of this future. Near the sun, energy-rich civilizations could flourish through vast solar arrays and dense industrial systems. Farther out, nuclear systems or other advanced power strategies would become more central because sunlight thins rapidly with distance. ESA has long noted that farther missions may need nuclear power because solar energy ceases to be sufficiently usable in the old way. This implies that the solar system may divide not just by world, but by energy regime. Inner system populations might build their abundance on radiant plenty, while outer system settlements define themselves through severe efficiency. Energy politics would not be an abstract policy field. It would shape architecture, industry, comfort, communication, migration, and even forms of government. A habitat rich in power can afford more redundancy, more beauty, more agricultural luxury, more transport. One living near energetic austerity may cultivate stronger habits of restraint and harder ideas of necessity. A future confined to one star would therefore still contain multiple civilizational economies, all nested inside the same stellar budget. The sun would remain the underlying treasury. Human societies would vary according to how directly, how weakly, or how expensively they draw from it. There would also be the question of violence. Any large civilization accumulates disputes over territory, law, trade, ideology, dignity, and memory. A solar system civilization would not be exempt merely because it inhabits vacuum. In some respects, the closed and infrastructural nature of space habitats may make conflict more dangerous, not less. Habitats depend on pressure boundaries, energy grids, water loops, transport schedules, and delicate systems that cannot endure reckless disruption easily. War in such an environment could be less spectacular than in fiction and more morally severe, because even limited sabotage may threaten civilians directly by damaging the systems that make habitation possible. This might encourage unusual restraint, or at least new forms of strategic caution. It might also produce forms of coercion, especially hard to resist. Control of docking rights, resource flows, orbital lanes, fabrication centers, water depots, or oxygen production could become instruments of dominance as powerful as armies once were. A civilization that never leaves the solar system may therefore discover that confinement to one star does not abolish politics. It intensifies infrastructure as the medium of politics. Whether this leads to stable federations, corporate empires, republican archipelagos, ecological commonwealths, or long intervals of uneasy balance is impossible to know. But the promise of local abundance will not erase the old human problem of power. One star can still contain many ambitions, and some of them will collide. Religion and philosophy would likely change as well. A species living across many worlds under one sun may begin to imagine sacred order differently from a species rooted entirely on one planet. The sun itself could become more central symbolically, not as naive worship but as the visible constant under which all human provinces remain bound. Earth may persist as origin myth and moral touchstone. The stars beyond the solar system could acquire a new metaphysical role, no longer as future colonies, but as reminders of limit, transcendence, or refusal. Some may see this confinement as humbling and beautiful. Others may experience it as an exile built into the structure of the universe. If the galaxy remains forever beyond reach, then longing itself becomes part of human inheritance. The stars would continue to inspire science, art, and wonder, yet also a sober recognition that desire need not imply access. This may produce a more tragic and perhaps more mature cosmic culture, one less intoxicated by conquest and more attentive to stewardship, finitude, and the depth available within bounds. A civilization that never leaves the solar system may therefore become spiritually richer, not poorer, because it is forced to wrestle with the meaning of enough. How large must a human future be to count as vast? How local can a species remain while still becoming many? What does destiny mean when it unfolds around one star and never crosses into another sky? These are not small questions. They may become the deepest questions such a civilization asks itself. Science would still flourish, though its heroic grammar may shift. Robotic missions, remote observatories, probe swarms, telescopic civilizations, and AI-supported exploration could extend human perception far beyond where human bodies go. Even if no crewed craft ever crosses interstellar distances, instruments may still move outward, data may still return from the edge of heliospheric influence, and observatories may study exoplanets in exquisite detail. The species could know much more than it can touch. This would create an interesting asymmetry. Human understanding of the galaxy might grow spectacularly while human presence remains local. The result could be a civilization of profound knowledge and permanent restraint, more like astronomers than conquerors on the scale of stars. That may sound modest compared with older expansionist dreams, but modesty here would still sit atop immense achievement. A solar system civilization able to inhabit multiple worlds, engineer orbital ecologies, and sustain deep scientific networks across one stellar domain would already be something history has never seen. The danger would be emotional rather than technical. Knowledge of what lies beyond can intensify longing. To see habitable exoplanets through telescopes and know that they remain effectively inaccessible may deepen the sense of cosmic enclosure. Yet perhaps that very pain would help keep wonder honest. The species would study what it cannot possess, and perhaps learn a more difficult form of reverence in the process. Economics would become one of the deepest shapers of this confined future, because a civilization spread across the solar system would still need to decide what abundance means when distance makes every transfer expensive. Moving people is costly. Moving heavy machinery is costly. Even moving information, though easier, cannot erase the time it takes for materials to cross between worlds. This would create not just markets, but gradients of opportunity. Inner system populations living close to major transport corridors, manufacturing hubs, and energetic abundance may enjoy a level of productive flexibility unimaginable to the outer settlements. Farther regions, especially those living under thinner sunlight or greater communication lag, might develop stricter civic habits because waste there would feel less like inefficiency and more like danger. Over time, this could create a new form of inequality, one no longer organized primarily by continent or nation but by orbital advantage. A person born in a wealthy habitat near Earth or in an industrial corridor near the asteroid belt may inhabit a civilization of strong redundancy, abundant technical labor, and regular access to goods. A child raised in a remote station under the shadow of the outer planets may grow up in a culture where repair is more honored than replacement, where migration is rare, and where luxury looks different because every object has crossed such distance to arrive. This inequality might produce resentment, but it could also produce distinct civilizational virtues. The inner system may become brilliant, fast, and restless. The outer system may become patient, severe, and deeply loyal to durability. If humanity never leaves the solar system, then economic philosophy may change as much as industry. The old fantasy of infinite growth could become harder to sustain in regions where transport, ecology, and energy all reveal limits directly. Wealth might come to mean resilience rather than excess, redundancy rather than speed, the ability to endure interruption rather than merely the ability to consume. Such a shift would not happen automatically, and there would still be empires, monopolies, and predatory ambitions. But life in closed habitats and distant settlements may teach a harder lesson than planetary modernity ever did. That endurance itself is a form of prosperity. Education would also change meaning in a civilization confined to one stellar system, because history would no longer be taught as the story of one planet expanding into a universe of open frontiers. It would instead become the story of one species learning how to inhabit its local cosmological inheritance without wasting it. Children born in orbital cities or Martian settlements would need to learn astronomy not as distant wonder alone, but as civic geography. They would need to know trajectories the way earlier peoples knew coastlines, delay times the way earlier peoples knew seasonal roads, and ecological engineering the way agricultural civilizations once taught rainfall, soil, and harvest. Yet education cannot be reduced to systems knowledge without shrinking the soul of the culture. A solar system civilization that never leaves its star would need great historians, poets, philosophers, and artists precisely because it lives beneath a limit so visible. The unreachable stars would continue to provoke longing, resentment, humility, and wonder. Literature may become one of the ways societies negotiate that ache. Some writers may treat the solar system as a magnificent home whose sufficiency was simply misunderstood. Others may write with the permanent melancholy of a species that can see further than it can go. Both moods could become foundational. This means schools in such a future may teach not only mechanics and biology, but emotional scale. They may teach how to love bounded vastness, how to inhabit grandeur without infinity, how to endure the fact that knowledge grows faster than reach. These are not trivial skills. If humanity never leaves the solar system, then maturity may consist partly in learning that the stars can remain sacred without becoming real estate. Memory of Earth would become more difficult with each generation born away from it. At first, Earth would remain immediate through living testimony. The first settlers on the Moon, Mars, and in free space would still remember wind, open clouds, ocean horizons, rain on glass, forests, traffic, night insects, gravity felt without machinery, and the casual abundance of a biosphere that does not require maintenance crews to remain breathable. But descendants born into artificial habitats or low-gravity settlements may know Earth only through stories, images, preserved rituals, legal traditions, and perhaps the occasional pilgrimage made possible by wealth or duty. That is when Earth begins to drift from homeland into symbol. For some, it may become holy ground, the place from which all human speech and biological memory ultimately came. For others, it may become overburdened with nostalgia, too idealized to remain real. Still others may resent the moral weight it carries, especially if Earth-based institutions continue to claim legitimacy over populations whose lived experience is almost wholly off-world. The question of who gets to interpret Earth could become as charged as the question of who governs resources. Such symbolic tension would matter because civilizations often fight hardest over inherited meanings, not just material needs. If humanity remains forever within the solar system, then Earth may become not only a planet but an argument. Is it origin, capital, shrine, burden, ecological treasure, political rival, or all of these at once? The answer will likely differ from world to world. A civilization that never leaves its stellar cradle may spend millennia still disagreeing about what the cradle means. Art would likely become more important, not less, under conditions of confinement. People often assume that a technologically intense future will be governed by engineering, logistics, and material constraints. That is true up to a point, but a civilization living within habitats, domes, tunnels, and delayed communication networks will also need beauty with unusual seriousness. Artificial environments can keep bodies alive while leaving the inner life thin. A Martian city, a spinning habitat, or a station on the edge of the outer system may remain perfectly functional and still become spiritually exhausting if every corridor feels designed only for maintenance. This is why architecture, music, ritual, literature, and public spaces may become part of the actual survival logic of the future. A people asked to remain within one star, and many engineered environments will need symbols large enough to hold its mixed emotions. It will need celebrations that make delayed worlds feel present to one another. It will need mourning rites for disasters that unfold too far away to be touched. It will need paintings, gardens, poems, and civic ceremonies capable of transforming industrial life into something worthy of loyalty. Perhaps the great art of such a civilization would not be art of conquest, but art of relation. Relation to the sun, relation to Earth, relation between inner and outer system populations, relation between the living and the archived dead, relation between the reachable and the forever unreachable. A species that never leaves the solar system may still produce a culture of immense sophistication, because limitation often sharpens perception. The closed horizon may force attention inward and upward at once. There is, however, an ultimate limit that cannot be ignored forever. If humanity truly never leaves the solar system, then all its futures remain tied to the fate of the sun. On human timescales, this is almost irrelevant. The sun is stable enough to underwrite civilizations for epochs beyond any current political horizon. But on the deepest temporal scale, confinement to one star becomes a sentence. Stellar evolution is not a political event, yet it is still a boundary. A species that never escapes its home system eventually inherits the mortality of its sun. This does not make the solar system a poor home, it makes it a magnificent but finite one. Humanity could flourish for ages, fill habitats, transform moons, build archives, compose epics, found republics in orbit, cultivate gardens in cylinders, mine asteroids into architecture, and still remain inside a long reprieve rather than an eternal answer. The stars would continue to remind it of that. Every unreachable sun becomes, in a distant sense, another life the species will never live. The emotional consequence of this limit is profound. A civilization may become great enough to accept it, or it may remain quietly haunted by the thought that all its splendor unfolds under a clock too large to feel and too real to deny. If humans never leave the solar system, then their greatest triumph may also remain, in the oldest cosmic sense, temporary. And yet temporary does not mean trivial. Human beings have always lived under limits larger than themselves. Mortality has never prevented love, law, art, discovery, or architecture from mattering. The same may prove true on the civilizational scale. If the solar system is the largest stage we ever truly occupy, then that stage remains more than sufficient for grandeur. There is room there for many cultures, many experiments in living, many forms of justice and failure, many climates of mind, many beautiful mistakes. A single star can still host a history wider than anything our present era knows how to contain. Perhaps the deeper lesson is that scale and dignity do not require infinity. There is a temptation to think that unless humanity reaches the stars, it has somehow remained provincial. But provincial compared with what? The moon, Mars, orbital cities, the asteroid belt, the ocean moons, the dim outer reaches, the long webs of communication and trade between them. These are not narrow things. They are enough to transform the species beyond recognition. If humans never leave the solar system, they may still become a civilization so spread through local space that the old age of one-world history comes to seem like a childhood. The stars would remain. They would shine above every habitat dome, every Martian valley, every orbital garden, every mining outpost, every settlement in the far cold. They would remain distant, perhaps forever. But below them, under one sun, humanity could still build a future immense enough to deserve awe, even if that awe always carries at its farthest edge the ache of a door that never opened.